Labrador literature lover is back with more books to browse. Wayne Button is breezing through the pages and he joins us to talk about this week's pick. This time, his chosen title has a pandemic and Labrador twist. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning, Janice. How you doing?
I'm hanging in there. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Just reading books for you guys, trying to stay busy. I'm doing really well.
So which selection are you bringing us this week?
This week we're going to be talking about We All Expected to Die, the Spanish influenza and how it hit Labrador in 1918 to 1919 by Anne Budgell.
And what's it like reading a book about the Spanish flu during the present pandemic?
Well, it really hits close to home because a lot of times with the Spanish influenza, really this hit three communities in Labrador extremely hard, specifically what they called back then Sandwich Bay, which is now known as Cartwright, and two other communities that don't even exist anymore, Ocock and Hebron. So, reading it, the same fears kind of came through with COVID. When it first started, I was really worried that, if this virus gets into some small communities, it could probably deplete a lot of them. But so far, we've been lucky. So it kind of hit close to home reading it like that.
Now, Wayne, I know you're a fan of nonfiction. So what was it like reading a book like this?
Oh, it was great. Most history books are a little bit boring and so forth, but I got to say, in the middle of this book, there's one or two chapters, and I'll tell people, it's nothing really to be proud of, but if you open it up, you would think it's fiction. You would think that it's a horror story or something because, there's so many intricate stories about, you got to realize, back then, when people passed away, it wasn't like today, you just call 911 and they come pick up the body. People in the community had to bury the body. People in the community had to make the coffin, and everybody was sick, especially the men that did, the burying and stuff. So there's a lot of cases where the bodies were left in the house, and a lot of people had dogs that ran free because they had dog teams. So what happened in a couple of communities is the dogs became wild and would break into the house and would actually eat some of the bodies. And so it was like something out of a horror movie. And they would have huge burials where they would bury over 100 bodies in one part because the ground was frozen and they couldn't bury 100 different bodies in different parts. So, like I said, it sounds gruesome, but it's an interesting part of history of Labrador that I think all Labradorians should know about because it was something I definitely never knew about, and I've been here my whole life.
Well, it sounds like you really enjoyed this read. What was it about it that you enjoyed the most?
Well, mostly the fact that there was a lot of things in there about the history of Labrador that I didn't know. You hear about different things. Everybody knows about Grenfell and everybody knows about Dr. Patton and different things about the R&R community here in Labrador West. But I never knew anything about some of these communities. Like I said, two of them don't even exist anymore. Ocock had 207 people die out of 263. And Hebron had over 86 people die out of 100 people. So 86% of the community was wiped out in 1 year, actually more specifically about 4 months. So it was just interesting little things, tidbits like that I never ever knew about. Seeing how they approached the government, and the government never actually gave them help. One little girl was actually even caught in her house for a month by herself. Everybody in the community was dead. Just so many small, intricate stories that I can't believe I've never heard before. It was really interesting to me.
So who would you recommend this book to, Wayne?
Anybody that's really into Labrador history. This is a book that I know growing up, we always read Lord of the Labrador Wild, which is a great book in school. But, this is a great piece of history that I think a lot of kids in school should even have to read in high school. But anybody into history, anybody into public health and pandemics and things like that, Anne Budgell does a really great job here of collecting history of Labrador over those years, I got to say.
Now, speaking of recommendations, you may have seen on our Facebook page that we've been looking for TV reviewers and someone to serve up a slice of the seemingly endless options on Netflix, The Gem, Crave, all those wonderful sites. And Wayne Button, Book Wayne, you offered up another Wayne. TV Wayne Walsh is joining us on the line this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Now, what made you suggest, how are we going to do this with two Waynes on the line? Let's start calling you by your last names. Button, you made the suggestion for us to talk to Walsh. Why did you do that?
Well, Wayne's a good friend of mine, and he's always been recommending movies and shows to me. Whenever you go over his house, a lot of times he'll say, "Oh, did you hear about this show? Or did you hear about this?" And he'll put on like a YouTube video. So he's always recommending shows and stuff to me, and usually hits a home run when he does. So when you guys were looking for someone who was into show and movie recommendations, I said, "Hey, I got a person for you."
And I understand there's a bit of a funny story about the two Waynes.
Yeah, I mean, me and Wayne, we're good friends, and sometimes we get ourselves into trouble helping each other out. At each other's houses, hanging things and stuff like that. So we always have this dream of us having our own show together called Hangin with Wayne and Wayne. And there's actually T-shirts made. There's a whole dialogue. I mean, maybe you guys can help us out. Maybe we'll pitch it to CBC and we'll run it.
Maybe. Well, we're giving you a half hour on the show at least, or 20 minutes. And Wayne Walsh, what is it that you look for in a show when you're making suggestions?
Usually what we look for is, we're in a little bit of a different case. My wife is a nurse, and I work at IOC all the time. So we also have two young kids. So we don't have a lot of free time. So what we're looking for is something that'll keep us interested, but we might be able to watch one episode a night like a lot of other families who's working and raising kids. So we try and find something that's something to keep us interested, but not something too long that drags on. So it's just something we can keep moving night by night, where we watch them so sporadically and don't get to binge for, the 2 or 3 hours that someone may spend binging on something.
Now, you've been watching a new show from Amazon Prime. Can you tell us about that one?
The one on Amazon Prime I've been watching actually came from Netflix. I've always been a fan of anything history related and anything that's been real. So I started with Netflix, and we've seen a show called Waco. Waco happened back in 1993 in Texas, and it's an actual real event that happened. And those things usually get me interested, such as other shows like Mindhunter with the Unabomber and things like that. But the one that's so special about Waco is that for such a black mark in American history, I was actually alive. The event happened in 1993, and to bring it all back into this time, this era, to introduce the events that happened back then is something that always kept me interested. So after watching the 6-part miniseries about David Koresh, and back in the early 90s, there was a lot of quote-unquote cults on the go. It was just people that thought differently in the way that the U.S. government held it. So after we watched the 6-part series, who starred some, there's a guy from Friday Night Lights in it, Taylor Kirsch, and he plays David Koresh, who is the main leader of that group. And it's more focused on the people who were inside the compound at the time, opposed to what you see on the news, which was coming from the government. So when we speak about Amazon Prime, I was just lucky enough to be looking at that one night after we watched Waco. And there's actually a 2-hour documentary on everything that the government did. So they kind of reflected themselves pretty well in that I could watch the show on Waco, which was on Netflix, that was a dramatization from a book of a survivor. It was based on that. So you see that perspective at all. And then you can go on Amazon Prime and see the actual history, the events, the real videos. Is very raw, very documentary-like. And you can try and take the two accounts and figure it out for yourself how it worked. And that's always pretty neat how they kind of work like that.
I remember that event quite well, actually, when it was hitting the news. And Wayne Button, I understand you read a book about Waco.
Yeah, actually, after I watched the show, it said the 2 books that it was based on. So my wife actually gave me one for my birthday, and I ended up buying the FBI one as well. So just like the other Wayne, I was trying to get both perspectives. So I read the book from the people in the compound, and I actually read the book from the FBI negotiators ideology as well, and it was interesting.
So do you guys get into debates over books versus shows?
No,
Not
never.
so much books or. Now we also have different perspectives on shows we watch. Sometimes we suggest stuff, sometimes they're big wins, and sometimes they're complete fails, to be honest with you. We're two different personalities, which makes Hangin with Wayne and Wayne always something eventful to watch. It's some sort of nuisance series or something goes on that's just usually funny. So anything that comes up that maybe we talk about is not a home run is usually just something we laugh about later.
Well, I'm really glad that I got to hang with Wayne and Wayne today, and we'll talk to you both again next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much for having us.
And that was Wayne Walsh telling us what to watch, and Wayne Button telling us what to read. Well, perhaps you